Further questions on the ICE situation. Um, so there's been some provocations in the media in this sort of somewhere between sort of, I don't know, Salmon Sheets and the New York Times, remembering Bill Buckley only really respected the New York Times. And the FT is sort of the music of the Davos crowd, I would say. From here we get the provocation. What are you, an idiot? You would have a police force that has the power to arbitrarily kill the citizens. And then you would consider this to be reasonable. So de facto, I want to dispel that, I think. Now, it's true that J.D. Vance did say, oh, they have absolute immunity. Now, that if he would repeat that and say that I didn't just make a slip in speech when I said that, that would be interesting, although the vice president doesn't himself have the power to change the laws such that the ICE has absolute immunity. That would it would indicate something. I mean, and maybe beyond just having made a mistake, maybe it would indicate that's his attitude towards on the question. But still, this would not mean. However, one parts analyze the video. So I mean, I don't agree with anyone who says that it's obvious that what happened in the video is particularly obvious. Because one thing, there's all kinds of factors. The more get unearthed. One getting asked the question, how much harassment is a police officer to be expected to take, and then even if one is inclined to charge with murder, the degree of the murder would be totally affected by that. He was double teamed by the two wives, and it was fairly direct, and he had a previous incident, and now they're even alleging that he had internal bleeding still from the previous incident of being run over and dragged by a protester. And they were at least surviving spouse was quite vigorous anti-ICER, I'd say. Even if one is inclined to charge murder, it would still play some role in determining the mens rea and in determining the degree of the charge. But all that is, again, that would indicate that one particular officer had violated the law. It wouldn't indicate that the law said that. Now, again, Vance's comment is very interesting, but it hasn't been sort of, as it were, energized with a further probing into whether he said that deliberately or not, and whether it was just a slip or whether it indicated his attitude towards the overall policy, which again, that may be troubling, but that doesn't mean that doesn't tell us what the law is. Now I'll make a statement to try to bolster everything I just said. The same people that are now raising alarm bells did not have this same attitude prior to this case. Some of them did not have the same attitude while the previous administration was in office, etc., etc. And then you could add a lot of different cases, right? But in fact, there's been an endless chain of such sort of Byron Angle type abuses, such abuses which take the form of we're treating the American public as the foreign enemy abroad who's engaged in some kind of insurrection. We're acting as an anti-insurrection force, which has been trained by the CIA to do this stuff abroad in n number of countries where they've overthrown governments in order to open up markets. I mean, there's a certain point to the U.S. aid stuff, is that the U.S. aid, by doing humanitarian acts, is opening up markets. And the thing that opening up markets does is it flattens the mores of people abroad. It flattens the mores. So, for instance, it makes Russians who aren't naturally inclined to be idiotic people as we Americans are, smile more, at stupid moments when they shouldn't be smiling, and be less serious, partially because of the demand for the so-called workers who sell empathy, Starbucks workers, Pan Am Smile, etc. So far as this becomes de rigueur in certain parts of the workforce, and it spreads to the whole people, it's sort of a form of the market, opening markets in the form of spreading a certain type of mores, and it certainly goes along with this type of policing also. But this type of policing has existed, so there's an endless number of cases in American legal practice where we could see abuses by police, right? There's a long chain of abuses. Not a long chain of abuses, more like just endless abuses. But these people weren't making these accusations about simply the capitalist system. Because of why? Though maybe some proportion of them because they think it's part of keeping law and order under a good system that allows for a certain proportion of people to enjoy a very pleasant life. I don't mean elites, I mean middle class. The heaviest proportion of the mores is produced by middle class, who are sort of like, if not exactly like house slaves, something where there's a negotiation with the devil, kind of. They see the bad part of the regime, they deplore it, but they don't cry, the police have the right to arbitrarily kill the public under this type of open market regime that they're trying to spread also to Russia, to the Eastern Slavs, and which in fact already infects Putin, in my opinion. So that's why Putin's so weak, and he should have been replaced with, so what happened, just to step aside for just a second, what happened to Prigozhin, who was the second most popular man in Russia, is that he and another general were going to try to take out a few other generals, but they outflanked them, and then everybody was away at their dacha, and they said, we don't know about what's happening. Nobody chimed in, but there was a moment when an elite stepped up and said, we want Prigozhin. Putin would have been ousted. That was what Putin called the knife in the back, the armed mutiny. He called it in his English language Kremlin dispatch at the time. That would have been better for Russia, definitely, because Putin is as Dugin says, almost a liberal. Yeah, the days of Putin are narrow. They're narrowing. He's very weak, and they're narrowing. But okay, what's the point? The point is, my accusation is some people who are raising this claim against ICE, they're only raising it almost like because it's Vance, because it's Trump. That's clearly that's not true, but I just want to raise that as sort of a Godonkin problem, sort of, like just as a provocation. So clearly that's not straightforwardly true, because it involves all kinds of questions of states' rights. It involves all kinds of questions of local habits, local mores, and it involves, of course, especially the issue of sort of ethno-nationalist versus states who appreciate the movement of the flows of population as they are. And especially California. I mean, as a Californian, especially as Californians have privileged the Spanish language on most public offices, DMV, and etc. I mean, I'm not saying privilege above English, but I'm just saying put on the equal footing, even though that's not a federal law. That's what we do in California. So, I mean, just to say, of course, the situation has all kinds of peculiar local pathos involved in them. But at the same time, we can analyze the question surely as a logos matter. We could analyze the question as a matter of justice, which then involves pathos. We could analyze the question in other ways. And I think even analyzing it as a matter of strict justice, we come into a lot of very salient questions, which once, if we're allowed to remove out of the mania for presenting the current case, the Renee Good case, as though it were the end all and be all, and as though it were the center of time. But if we allow to say, no, look, there's been all kinds of other murders. If that was a murder, yeah, there's been a lot of other extrajudicial murders by police, by forces that treat the community as enemies, and so on. It's not a special case, as a lot of people are making, people all of a sudden are making it out to be under the current conditions. I mean, do they resemble a Braunhemden? Yes, I grant that, because it's just like it's a certain MAGA administration is creating their own private force in a way, even though, true, on the other side of that, ICE existed previously. It's just that they're being their roles are being increased. The style of their advertising is becoming vulgarized, Trumpized, and partially I want to say there's lots of things that you couldn't have in a Dostoevskian sense, like morally, you couldn't have ever made them part of your plans. But since they're here, why not make the best of it? And my basic tack is, Vance is a military man. Whatever he appears on while he's in the shadow of Trump, he'll appear differently when you see his military code of conduct come out. And that would happen once he comes into ultimate power. Maybe Trump, I don't think Trump was falling asleep during that milk thing, despite what the same people that said Biden was senile said. I think it was kind of a boring subject, as Samuel Moyn quipped. And besides, he wasn't actually asleep, because I noticed that he was nodding at certain comments. He was just sort of in a reverie, and it was a little bit like the moment when he stepped up to look at his the great beautiful ballroom that he's preparing for, I think, one of his children's marriage fetes. It's not such a terrible thing in itself. I don't know. It's touching in a way. But okay, I'm not a supportive Trump or ethno-nationalism, but I think it's a good thing if the whole point of the army is that the law should cease to be law, not because of the abuses and the arbitrariness of ICE, but rather because there's a sound Praetorian Guard, and then Pisistratus or then Vance could step forward and say, all this law was things that were established by this market order, this evil market order, and now I'm just going to create the law directly out of reason. As he's a Straussian, and he's a good look at the natural right. I think there must be a moment to have some kind of all the threads are knit together, all in scene, and form some new dancing star, form some new wild bird out of the so-called wasteland. And there can be changes. So I think people are a little bit too prone to treat all change as fable, and to still remain in this orbit of the Boltons and the professors all weaned on their Keynesianism, on the so-called macro and microeconomics of Keynesianism, as though there weren't 1,001 other forms of economics aside from these fiscal policies trying to alter how the cycle of the market, and on the other hand, these theories of rational marginalism and so on. This is a very tiny niche of economic thinking, totally in power. What would it mean to change it? It would mean that the courses in university classes would change, and then the people that ran the world would have taken different courses at the elite universities. That's all it would mean. It's not something fabulous or like some recrudescence of the natural passions or some Dionysian event. And yet, in a certain way, it would be.